This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. Everyone says Rockey loves me. After marriage, we also treated each other with respect. Until that day, when I discovered he had been nurturing his white moonlight outside, I confronted him with red eyes. He was so afraid of tarnishing the woman's reputation that he directly had me locked in the confinement room. "You can leave now." The sound of sticks hitting the iron door came sharply. The guard stood at the door of the confinement room, looking at me with disdain. She looked down on me, the Mrs. Rockey, just like everyone else outside. Struggling to get up, it took me a while to realize that I, who was buried under the debris flow, had actually been reborn. Rockey, just like in my past life, was standing outside the gate waiting for me. "Why are you crying?" The handsome brows and eyes of the man came into view. I even remember the joy of caressing his brows and nose every night. Having been reborn and facing him, we stared at each other in silence. "I really have been reborn." I sniffed, and silently walked down the steps. The winter in Wyoming was indeed very cold. The cold made my heart tremble with sadness. Rockey habitually took off his coat and draped it over me. "Don't catch a cold." The long-lost warmth mixed with a faint scent of gardenia. I recognized this scent, Serena's family's soap bean fragrance. I remembered how, when I questioned him in my past life, Rockey's originally gentle aura gradually turned cold, and his eyes held the suppression that was about to explode. "Haley, after locking you up for 3 days, are you still not calmed down? Can you stop causing trouble?" At that time, I was full of grievances. In the face of Serena's provocation, Rockey turned a blind eye. I could only struggle in vain, isolated and helpless, and ended up becoming a joke in others' eyes. "Rockey, in this life, you go ahead and love your white moonlight openly, I won't accompany you." Struggling to hold back the tears that were about to spill, I stiffly took off the coat and did not mention the scent. "Just wear it yourself, I'm not cold." Rockey paused, and it took him a while to come back to his senses. Back home, I picked up the kettle and went to the bathroom to take a shower. When I came out, Rockey was rarely cooking in the kitchen. On the table were already 3 homemade dishes. "Sit down, there's just one soup left." Who would have thought that the aloof and admired man was now wearing my apron? If I hadn't seen him publicly order me to be locked in the confinement room to protect that woman, I could hardly believe he was the same person. Even after taking a hot shower, my body still occasionally shivered. It was the pain of being buried under the debris flow, the despair of being abandoned by Rockey. I took a deep breath and told myself, "Haley, you have to be strong. If others don't cherish you, betray you, and abandon you, then you must love yourself even more." I served myself a big bowl of rice. In the confinement room for 3 days, no one took care of me. Every day there were only 2 steamed buns, thin porridge, and pickles. Rockey brought the seaweed soup to the table and was stunned. I didn't wait for him. I just grabbed meat pieces one by one, eating like a starving ghost. He sat down across from me and ladled the soup. "Eat slowly. If you like it, I'll buy more tomorrow." He placed the soup next to me. The clinking of bowls and chopsticks echoed in the house, making the 2 of us seem especially estranged. After finishing dinner in a whirlwind, I got up to leave. "Haley," Rockey called me. "Let's talk. You don't need to give me the cold shoulder." Rockey's personality was aloof, silent, and seldom showed emotions due to his father's influence. He was self-disciplined, accomplished, and rarely expressed feelings. Early on, Serena's father passed away, and she left Wyoming with her mother. We lost contact. A few years later, I met her in the mountains. At that time, she had already been forced by her maternal uncle to marry a drunkard. No one could understand Rockey's astonishment and anger at that time. The proudest girl in the yard, in just a few years, had been tortured by her former husband. When Rockey held her, Serena was curled up in his arms, trembling. She had suffered severe psychological trauma and had a child. It took me 2 years to stabilize her. I really didn't want her to suffer any more harm. Perhaps because of my changed attitude after rebirth, this life's Rockey chose to tell me about the past. The pain in his eyes was genuine. He harbored a youthful pity for that woman. Though I had long given up hope, seeing my husband moved by another woman was more than my soul could bear. He wouldn't know that his moment of vulnerability felt like a sharp knife thrust into my heart, leaving me in a state of bloody agony. I struggled to steady my breathing, maintaining my last shred of rationality. "So, you locked me in the confinement room?" Rockey's breath caught. He tried to make me understand his predicament. "You accused her of being a mistress in front of so many people. Do you know how much impact that has on a single mother? Rockey, you earn $800 a month, and you give me $200 and her $600. Is this what you call clear and above board? If you love her so much and can't bear for her to suffer, why did you marry me? What do you take this family for? You don't want her to be hurt, so you lock your legitimate wife in the confinement room. Do you know that from now on I will be mocked by the world, have a disciplinary record, be fired by the textile factory, and never find another job? The grievances from my past life finally burst forth with each question. Looking at the man I had loved for half my life, I laughed bitterly. You know it, you just don't care. Tears blurred my vision, trapped in my own pain, gasping for breath like a dying fish. The man embraced me, and the unique, clear warmth of Rockey enveloped me. He held my waist and stroked my back, seemingly at a loss. I didn't mean to. Haley, don't cry. It's okay, if you don't have a job, I am your husband and will support you for life. In the past life, he said the same thing. He said he would support me for life. At that time, I had maintained my pitiful dignity and refused him. I insisted on looking for a job everywhere, but with a disciplinary record, no one dared to hire me. In the end, I came home like a stray dog, bloodied and battered, and became a full-time housewife. Rockey did not ridicule or despise me for that. He was actually a good person who meant what he said. When we married, he handed over all his savings to me without reservation. Before I knew about Serena, I was truly happy. But after Rockey locked me in the confinement room for another woman and I lost my job, many began to mock and ridicule me. They whispered behind Rockey's back that I was a toad trying to eat swan meat. The worst part was that those vicious words were all too true for me. People in the world aren't afraid of falsehoods that charm with cleverness. They fear the truth that wounds the heart. Day after day, I grappled with my own inner turmoil, becoming an ignorant shrew ready to explode at the slightest provocation. The past was too painful to revisit. In this life, I knew where my path lay. Wiping my tears, I pushed Rockey away and responded softly, "All right, Rockey, has my sister-in-law come back?" When Rockey opened the door, Serena was outside in a light yellow plum blossom warm cotton jacket, wrapped in the season's most popular red scarf, making her delicate oval face even more refined. "It's cold outside, come in." Rockey stepped aside and casually placed slippers for her. Serena looked down with a shy smile, her eyes full of affection. I knew why she had come and watched her performance with a cold smile. "Rockey, I'm here to return the key. It's not appropriate for me to keep living in your marital home." Serena glanced at me with a hint of apology, her eyes clearly challenging. "Sister-in-law seems to have some misunderstandings about us. I'll move out to avoid making her uncomfortable." Rockey looked astonished and instinctively looked at me, but I had no reaction. He appeared somewhat flustered, his lips slightly parted as if unsure of what to say. "Rockey?" Serena's face showed confusion as she tentatively asked, "Does sister-in-law not know yet?" The room fell silent. "I'm sorry, I didn't know, Rockey." The woman's eyes instantly reddened, as if she had suffered a great grievance. "I'll move out now and return the house to you." Rockey grabbed Serena, who was pretending to leave. "Don't be ridiculous. It's winter, and with a child, where can you move to?" "Haley, that house was a gift from my family when I first started working. To allow Serena to recover, I've had her and her child living there." Seeing the unfortunate couple, I was unwilling to respond further. Rockey's face was pale, and his eyes carried a look of utter confusion. Not wanting to see their faces any longer, I got up to clear my dishes. "Rockey, I need to prepare for exams. I no longer care about your affairs outside. I don't want to." Before he could say anything more, I left without looking back. In 1977, the country carried out educational reforms. At that time, life had worn down my sharp edges, and I never thought of changing my fate through study. Having lived again, I wanted to live differently, unwilling to spend my life in a muddled way. I no longer cared how many women or children Rockey had outside. As long as we didn't divorce, he still had to support this family. I stayed at home all day, focusing on my studies. I didn't ask about his work outside. I was also not interested in his progress with his white moonlight. I no longer did his laundry. There were plenty of people outside to take care of him. I stopped asking about his well-being, let that unfortunate couple exchange pleasantries. When he came home, I was mostly at my desk, buried in my books. Days passed, and we had no communication. Sometimes I could hear his footsteps stopping at the bedroom door. I could feel him standing there for a long time. He seemed to want to say something to me, but I never turned around. In the end, he could only leave in silence. Sometimes at night, I studied late into the night at the desk he often used. Now he could only read in bed, but he didn't complain. Occasionally, I could sense him leaning against the headboard without reading. He just quietly watched me, his gaze deep and unreadable. Only when I adjusted my sitting position did he look away. He knew I didn't want to talk to him. Necessary life details were written on notes left on my desk before he went to work. We still slept in the same bed but did nothing. I was exhausted. After studying, I would fall asleep as soon as I got into bed. He saw my dirty clothes and wanted to help wash them, but he wasn't suited for that. Looking at the stained white shirt, I felt quite pained. It was one of my few new clothes. He looked somewhat regretful, like a child who had made a mistake, or someone mourning silently. I'm sorry, This was the first conversation we had in a long time. It's okay. I reapplied soap to the clothes. Go on and get busy. From now on, I'll wash my own clothes, you don't need to help. Rockey lowered his gaze, watching my figure, even though I was still in the house, even though I still slept beside him. Everything was different from before. On the weekend, Jorah, sweating profusely, knocked on my door. Haley, the study materials are more expensive than we expected. We don't have enough money from the contributions. Do you have any money left? In this era, study materials are scarce and thus very valuable. With the college entrance exam reopened, the enthusiasm for studying nationwide is at an all-time high. The new materials are sure to draw huge crowds at the bookstore. I had planned to pool money with a few partners to buy a set, but the price was unexpectedly high. Just this month, Rockey's living expenses also came in. It was still $200, neatly stacked in the drawer by the bed. I took out the largest $5 note, carefully placed it in my cotton jacket lining, and put on my boots. I hurried with Jorah to the bookstore. Haley, over here, over here. Mona, who was queuing at the checkout, shouted to me. I was squeezed so tightly that my hat nearly fell off. After struggling to poke my head out, I saw that in the midst of the bustling crowd, Rockey was protecting Serena and standing high on the stairs. Hearing my name, they also noticed me, who was barely visible in the crowd. Even as the person who was being cheated on, I had to admit that they were indeed a handsome couple. Serena showed a look of disdain, but I didn't mind. I gave them a slight smile from the crowded hall. Rockey's breath hitched as he looked at my relieved smile, and there was an unreadable sadness in his eyes. Haley, hurry up. Mona, nearly being pushed out of the front row, anxiously shouted. Ignoring the two of them, I took the money from my lining and raised it above my head, trying to pass it to her through the sea of people. Watch out, be careful. A sudden shout came from the stairs. I looked in the direction of the sound and saw Rockey leaping from nearly 2 meters high. The crowd hurriedly stepped back. He was tall and stood out even in a crowd. The man worked his way through the swirling crowd, gradually getting closer to me. He wrapped his arms around me. I lowered my head, avoiding his gaze. Please make way. Rockey's voice was cold. Rockey shielded me and pushed through the crowded crowd. Thank heavens, we finally made it in. Mona playfully saluted Rockey. Thank you, Rockey. Rockey nodded in response. The study materials were finally bought. Divided among 5 people, it came to $3.4 each. Although it was a bit pricey, everyone was still full of joy. Unfortunately, there were too many people, and the math materials had already been snatched up. They have them on the second floor, Rockey said. The second floor has a cafe, and because of the high prices, it is usually not crowded. Really? The 4 companions looked at Rockey with undisguised excitement. Rockey said little and signaled everyone to follow him upstairs. Rockey, you are simply a godsend. Mona winked at me playfully. I ignored her antics and silently followed everyone up. Rockey, here, by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a graceful woman waved and smiled. Not Serena, but who was she? Her gentle and serene smile could melt the ice. She had been well taken care of over the years. Rockey nodded and walked towards Serena. He pulled out a chair, looked back at me as if waiting for me to sit. I ignored him and walked past him. I squeezed into a spot with the 4 companions. Rockey's posture stiffened slightly, his eyelashes lowered, and his thoughts remained inscrutable. Serena, so you were waiting for the male god. A waitress approached, teasing Serena in a familiar manner. Beautiful Zhu Yingtai, can we order now? Lilac, stop joking. Serena smiled and reproached, not showing any embarrassment. Jorah turned to me and gave a knowing look. After years of friendship, I naturally understood her meaning. What's going on? I could only shrug in resignation and shook my head. Rockey observed our little gestures with his deep, inscrutable eyes. Lilac, tall and slim, was a friend of Serena. While taking orders, she chatted with us. It turned out that Serena had used Rockey's connections to help Lilac get a job at the bookstore cafe. Someone sincerely remarked, "This place is easy work, with a good environment and high pay, much better than our textile factory." Lilac, quite at ease, served coffee to everyone. Thanks to Rockey for helping out. Jorah leaned in and whispered, last year, when I passed by here, their job listing was $18 a month. I sniffed, turned my head to look at the view outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Cold, Rockey suddenly spoke. Before I could react, he had taken off his outer coat and draped it over me. Serena's smile froze slightly. Lilac was taken aback, looking strangely at Rockey and Serena. Then she realized, oh, we have a heater here. Rockey, Serena. From behind, an elderly voice called out, Professor Peter. Seeing who it was, Rockey and Serena both stood up simultaneously. Everyone, confused, followed suit, standing and bowing in greeting. Yes, please sit down. Professor Peter took the main seat and looked at the now graceful Serena, feeling quite emotional. Good child, your father's situation delayed you back then. Now that our country has reinstated the college entrance exams, you should cherish this opportunity. Serena's eyes were misty, recalling the hardships she had endured over the years. Thank you for your concern, Professor. Rockey has helped me a lot over the years. Professor Peter nodded in appreciation. You two grew up in the same courtyard. Now that he has succeeded, it's only right that he takes care of you. Serena's eyes flickered slightly as she cast a nonchalant glance at me. Back then, I missed a lot of knowledge. Although Rockey has been helping me review for a year, he always worries about my health and suggests I wait a year and take the exam next year. I knew Serena was trying to provoke me, to make me lose my composure and show the world my unreasonable behavior, proving I was unworthy of Rockey. This trick had worked on me many times before, but now, I no longer cared. Besides, I had already seen this in the high school examination reports in my previous life. In my previous life, under Rockey's careful attention and help, Serena studied for 2 years and successfully became the top student in the state. She became the pride of Wyoming. Standing at the awards ceremony, she was radiant and captivating. As an outstanding representative, she took the stage to give a speech, thanking the person who helped her emerge from the darkness with great emphasis. I wasn't eligible to enter the venue, but I saw her photo and interview in the newspaper. When the reporter asked if she would attend Kyoto University or Tsinghua University, the dazzling woman in the photo was gazing affectionately at the man sitting in the front row. I will stay in Wyoming for university. Not only is this my hometown, but it is also where my beloved is. In the future, I want to build our hometown together with him. I seemed to hear applause from all directions, deafening and piercing my eardrums. It was when she and Rockey were together that people praised them as a match made in heaven. I picked up my coffee listlessly and sipped it slowly. Bitter, so bitter. Add some sugar. Rockey quietly reminded me and picked up a sugar packet to add sugar for me. Professor Peter paused the conversation, looking at his usually aloof student, surprised by his attentiveness to a woman. He then asked, Rockey, who is this? Rockey naturally took my hand. Professor, this is my partner, comrade Haley. Serena's face turned extremely ugly. I felt confused. In my previous life, I had never considered the college entrance exam and had never been here. Never seen this elder, and had never experienced Rockey introducing me so seriously. But I couldn't be rude in front of an elder, so I responded. Hello, Professor Peter, I'm Haley. Oh. Professor Peter adjusted his glasses with a kind expression. Haley, do you plan to take the college entrance exam too? Yes. Professor Peter understood. Rockey, the 2 sets of materials you ordered from me were for Serena and Haley, right? Rockey nodded. Yes, both are good kids. Professor Peter pointed to the 2 stacks of study materials on the bar counter, the very ones we had queued to buy today. I've prepared the books. Remember to take them when you leave. Study hard at home, and if you have any questions, come and ask me again. With the math books secured, everyone was delighted. I stared at the 2 stacks of materials, lost in thought. One on the left, one on the right, neatly arranged. Rockey hadn't told me about reserving the materials for me. Aside from Serena, he was really good to me, but this divided goodness truly made me insecure. I really couldn't accept it. I had never minded Rockey helping others. It was part of his work and duty. But with Serena, I always felt that Rockey's heart was biased. The earthy smell surged back into my mind, reminding me of the humiliation and despair when Rockey abandoned me. My limbs lost strength in an instant, and I felt cold all over. Noticing the hand I was holding was trembling uncontrollably, Rockey looked at me in surprise and squeezed my hand gently. Professor Peter is asking you which school you plan to apply to. Rockey, seeing my abnormal state, asked softly with concern, Are you feeling unwell? I shook my head and apologized to Professor Peter. This time, with so many people applying, I plan to try and see which school I get into. If I don't get in, it's okay, I'll try again next year. Haley, aren't you staying in Wyoming for university? Mona was puzzled. After all, Serena's answer to Professor Peter was, I want to stay here because my beloved is here. Such words, in Mona's eyes, were very romantic. I want to leave here. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the painful memories of my previous life. I study hard because I want to leave. Maybe I'll have a better life without them. I thought I had moved on, but every time I talked about these things, my chest still ached. I knew I was avoiding the emotional issues with Rockey. I was a coward and a failure. But in my previous life, I had tried hard, struggled, and lost badly without blaming the heavens or others. This life, I admit, my cowardice led me to choose to retreat. At least I could leave with some dignity. Isn't it all clear now? Mona defended Rockey. He's only helping that pair of orphans and widows. Rockey has helped others before, too. He's such a good person. Haley, can you bear to let him go? Jorah looked at me with concern. Haley, if Rockey is helping others out of friendship, the organization will not agree to your divorce for this reason. I was determined. It doesn't matter if they don't agree. Once I get into college, I won't come back. We'll be separated for 4 years. If I want a divorce, there will always be a way. At that time, no one's face will be hurt. Why are you suddenly so cold-hearted? Mona was incredulous. Can't you see? Every time Rockey is particularly attentive to you, but you are always so indifferent, even today. Mona's eyes turned red. If you divorce because of this, it's too unfair to Rockey. Once, the wall of Mona's house collapsed. Her father had his leg crushed, and her mother ran off with someone else. The beautiful girl sought money everywhere, but those who had once pursued her either looked embarrassed or turned a blind eye. When Rockey saw the crying girl in the hospital, even though they didn't know each other at that time, he helped pay her medical bills, organized people to repair her house, and even found her a stable job. Brave Mona mustered the courage to confess her feelings to Rockey, who was still single at the time. But that night, Rockey gently turned her down. Mona knew she was not worthy of Rockey, but remained unwilling to give up. Rockey, you're so outstanding. Don't many girls confess to you? Rockey was taken aback and didn't answer. Though my family is not well off, I'm quite beautiful. I know you're still single. I don't seek marriage. Even being your girlfriend would make me happy. Mona had pursued people before and had been pursued countless times, but this was undoubtedly her bravest attempt. Yet Rockey still refused without hesitation. Later, we became good friends with Mona at the textile factory. She once openly shared this failed romance with Jorah and me, who at that time didn't know Rockey. She was so passionate and brave, loving openly and generously. After being rejected, she was sad for 2 days and then moved on, as if no trouble was worth staying in her mind for more than 3 days. No one knew how this usually confident and graceful girl, after the rejection, had lost her soul and fled into the rain that night. Rockey, in the torrential downpour, grabbed her slender figure. He held the umbrella for her, sheltered her, and took her back to her new home. Rockey said, "You are great. Even if rejected, you should still cherish yourself." Mona would never believe such a person could make a principled mistake. Jorah held my bike's handlebars and stopped us. "Haley, we are sisters. Whatever you decide, we will respect it." "Jorah," Mona called out urgently. Jorah continued calmly, "But you need to think carefully. Marriage is not a game. Don't act impulsively." I bit my lip and eventually spoke. "I'm not being impulsive. We are married, but he can't give me security. I feel anxious and uneasy every day. Since I decided to give up this marriage, I found out I could be calm and not a shrew. Mona is right. I might lose a good man, but I can be my true self." In the following days of preparation, the world slowly became calm. Without high hopes, my interactions with Rockey became much more harmonious. I couldn't hear others' ridicule or laughter anymore. I also no longer had to argue with him hoarsely. The past life was like a nightmare, fading with time. 7 months later, when the college entrance exam results were announced, I finally got into a good university as I wished. Serena, competing with me, also took the exam this year. She did better than me, but didn't achieve the exceptional results of the previous life. She predictably chose to attend high university, while I chose the warm South. The organization department held a citywide awards ceremony. This time, I was also invited. A man with a cane spoke as an outstanding representative. During the awards ceremony, the audience's applause was thunderous and continuous. Based on the results, I stood in the last row, and Rockey walked up to me with the certificate. "Congratulations." His voice was cold and restrained. I avoided his gaze, took the certificate, and carefully examined it. For the first time since my rebirth, I smiled with relief. Rockey stared at me, his eyes filled with restrained emotion. Only when the girl holding the tray reminded him softly did he step aside. With everything settled, I began preparing for my move to the south. Unexpectedly, Rockey's mother arrived at this moment. "Haley, can't you stay at high university?" Rockey's mother was an outstanding woman. She had always been very kind to me. "You two have been married for less than 2 years and have no children. If you go, you won't see each other for half a year. You both need to think carefully." Rockey's mother didn't know that our marriage was essentially in name only. "If you get pregnant while studying, how can we be at ease letting you live alone in another place?" I pondered for a long time and decided to seize this opportunity to say what needed to be said. "Mom, actually, Mom, it's fine. Rockey suddenly interrupted me and I was a bit surprised. I will make arrangements. Everything will prioritize Haley's studies, and I will pay attention to the child's matters. Rockey's mother shook her head disapprovingly. You can't just pay attention. What if you accidentally get pregnant? What will you do? I'll file for a transfer to the south to take care of her. I was confused. The man avoided my gaze, his seemingly calm face showing hints of unease. Rockey's mother, never favoring her son, considered it and thought it was feasible. That's better. No matter how important the job is, nothing is more important than your own wife. Rockey's mother was delighted. Haley, you've heard it. With this assurance, you can focus on your studies. Your father and I won't worry too much. Just hope you two will be happy together. My eyes reddened and I couldn't speak. Rockey took his mother back and the thought of divorce was stuck in my throat. It wasn't the right time to bring up divorce. Not to mention the organization's approval, even if I got into a good university. Divorcing my original partner would surely invite criticism and accusations of ingratitude. Realizing it's not the right time to act impulsively, I decided to put off discussing it for now. In mid-August, I boarded the train, finally leaving the city. With the flood season approaching, Rockey was very busy at work, often working late into the night. I hinted for him to keep an eye on the mountain reinforcement around Xiaokangshan. He always took his work seriously and promised to arrange for someone to inspect it. Rockey asked if I needed him to take me to the southern city. I shook my head, indicating no. He handed me the passbook from his drawer. It was all the savings from our home, $15,000 he had saved in his early years. I did not accept it. In the dead of night, Rockey carefully held my hand, quietly staying up all night. I pretended to be asleep, staring at the pitch-black night and listening to the evening wind. At parting, I hugged Mona and Jorah. Goodbye. I bid Rockey farewell. University life was tough, vibrant, and busy. Each month, I received a letter from Rockey, including $200 for living expenses. For a college student, this was quite a substantial amount. Once, when a roommate saw me opening the envelope, she envied the caring and capable person I had. I just smiled and said nothing, keeping the money aside. Now, while studying and tutoring, following my teacher's research, I earn $8 a month. By saving diligently, I can support myself. Occasionally, a letter would include a red leaf or a plum blossom. The letter paper had a short and beautiful penmanship. The maple leaves at home have turned red. Or, a single plum blossom at the door. Or, parents are well, don't worry. Sometimes, I would also receive letters from Jorah and Mona. Thanks to Professor Peter's guidance, Jorah managed to get into Haida. Mona didn't pass, but she continued working at the textile factory. They would occasionally share some interesting stories with me. For example, Jorah disdainfully wrote, half a month into the new school year, the school held a campus star selection, and Serena won first place. And Mona angrily wrote, Serena is riding on Rockey's fame and thriving at Haida. There are even rumors that she is Rockey's lover, and they have a very well-behaved son. I no longer cared much. Time flew by, and the end of the year arrived. During the first winter break of university, most students had already left. I applied to stay on campus with the approval of the counselor and wrote a letter back. Busy with studies, not returning for the winter break. The winter in the south was warmer than in the north. The New Year streets were brightly decorated and lively. On New Year's Eve, I was alone in the dormitory, making dough. The gatekeeper called me downstairs to take a phone call. It was Rockey's mother calling. Child, if Rockey hadn't come home for New Year today, I wouldn't have known you didn't come back. Are you doing okay, out there? On the other end of the line, I could hear the distant sound of fireworks exploding in the sky. I'm fine. I sniffed and exhaled a cloud of white breath. And you all, how is your health? Mom, the fireworks outside are really beautiful. A child's clear voice came through the phone. I was stunned. It was Serena's child's voice. Rockey had already brought his lover home for the new year. During family reunion times, emotions are particularly vulnerable. I knew I had exited this love story that wasn't meant for me, yet my heart still ached unbearably. Why could there not be even a little consideration for my feelings? I'm hanging up. My eyes were slightly sore, and I stared blankly at the distant dormitory building with sparse lights. The cold air filled my lungs, making my tears flow uncontrollably. The gatekeeper's phone rang urgently. The communicator answered the phone and learned that it was still a relative of the leader trying to get me back. I said, why did you hang up without finishing your words? Even if there's a conflict, you shouldn't be angry with your elders on New Year's, right? I had to pick up the phone, my voice hoarse. Hello? Haley, don't misunderstand. Rockey's mother was smart. She quickly figured out why I hung up abruptly. She looked disapprovingly at the culprit and handed the phone to Rockey. You handle it. Rockey's mother sent someone to take Serena and her child to the dining room. She asked Rockey to take this opportunity to have a good talk with me. After a long silence, I was shivering with cold. I guessed that Rocky's mother was not by the phone, so I said, "Hang up." "Haley." Rockey suddenly called my name. It was she who brought the child to visit my father. My father kept her for dinner. I didn't know. I rubbed my eyes, tears falling uncontrollably. "Hang up." On the second day of the new year, I met Rockey. He had taken a 20-hour green train, looking travel-worn. "Why are you here?" We stood at the entrance of the South University female dormitory, facing each other. "Just came to see you." Rockey had lost weight, with a sense of helpless fragmentation. He was returning to work on the fourth day, so he had little time. "Show me your school." Rockey took off the scarf from his neck and wrapped it around me. It smelled of Holmes' K-pop and soap. I led him around, introducing him to the university's long history and various buildings. This was the most I had spoken to him since my rebirth. Rockey listened attentively, his gaze often falling on my profile. We made dumplings at the campus canteen. The canteen aunt recognized me and, with a spoon in hand, asked where I found such a handsome man. I didn't know how to answer. Rockey was very natural. "I'm Haley's husband. Thank you for taking care of her." The campus was vast, and after walking a lot, we casually found a bench by the lake to sit down. I stared at the lake, with nothing to say. Rockey, exhausted, leaned on my shoulder and fell asleep. When he left, I did not see him off. I simply told him at parting, "I know you're very busy with work, so don't come again. It's quite tiring." Not seeing his expression, I quickly turned and left. I am not strong. I don't want to gamble. Not long after, I received a phone call from Rockey's mother. Rockey was seriously ill. Her voice was hoarse. "In recent years, Rockey has buried himself in work, but I know he hasn't been well." She pleaded, "Haley, can't you really come back?" I gritted my teeth, holding firm. Rockey's mother broke down in tears. Rockey is deeply influenced by his father and work, and he never talks about his feelings. But as his mother, I know he really cares about you. On your wedding day, he was so nervous his hands were shaking. How could he not like you? There were several girls who confessed their feelings to him. I know he turned them all down. If he didn't like you, he would never have agreed to marry you. After my absence in caring for the seriously ill Rockey, I received a flurry of letters over the winter break. They accused me of being ungrateful and unworthy of being a wife. The organization leaders called, expressing concern for my studies and well-being, emphasizing the importance of balancing both career and family. When Mona cried and told me that Rockey was unable to eat and that Jorah had gone to the hospital and slapped him, I was stunned. "Are you just lying here like a living dead person? She's gone. Won't you try to bring her back? You're a grown man. Should someone still need to teach you these things?" Half a month later, I received a letter from Rockey. "I'm well now, don't worry. Don't worry about the organization's inquiries. I hope my wife is safe and healthy. The handwriting was not as strong as before, as if he had just recovered from illness. Yet, the characters looked more weathered, and I knew this was not something he could write in his current state. Rockey's mother did not reproach me for my coldness, and she must have noticed something about Serena. After Rockey's condition stabilized, she finally felt relieved. Instead, she frequently called to check on my situation and studies. She was an outstanding mother. In the summer of my third year, Rockey was exceptionally promoted due to his outstanding work and public reputation. I was somewhat stunned when I learned of this news. I knew about this promotion plan. This important document for cultivating young cadres had its nominations and reviews conducted secretly by senior officials, with the final list being announced only at the end. However, in my past life, Rockey's name was not on the final list. I suddenly recalled when I was in confinement, the captain had vaguely reminded me. Even rumors, if manipulated by ill-intentioned people, can be troublesome with a tarnished reputation. I was disoriented, not expecting my previous struggles to have dragged Rockey down so much. Yet, he never mentioned his exclusion to me. At that time, we had visited his ancestral home. Rockey's father had thrown a huge tantrum. Rockey received a severe slap from his father. His mouth was bleeding, and he asked me to leave first. "Haley, our family is different from ordinary families. Many things." "Mom." Rockey interrupted his mother, coming out of the study. He stopped his mother, took my hand, and left the house. "We're leaving now. Say goodbye to Dad." So that's how it was. I sat dazed on the bench, the surrounding noise fading away. That night, I thought about many things. In this marriage, I had placed all my grievances on Rockey, and he was at fault. But I knew I also had my shortcomings. To this day, I still resent his abandonment in saving me. But today, I also know he had shown me tolerance and made sacrifices. Perhaps, our relationship simply wasn't meant to be. I let go of my obsession and wrote my first letter of the year. "Congratulations on your transfer. Reflecting on the past, I feel ashamed. May you cherish yourself in the long journey ahead. Rockey declined the olive branch extended by the capital city and applied for a transfer to the southern city. The leadership was reluctant to let him go, but agreed to coordinate with the school on my behalf. However, Rockey declined their help. He didn't want to disturb me. Rockey's mother was overjoyed, feeling that her son had finally seen the light. He's better than your father. Work is important, but life must be lived well too. Rockey's father had no objections. He was proud that his son had managed to get promoted through his own efforts. At this juncture, I didn't bring up the divorce. I knew that Rockey's current position was hard-earned and that his future looked bright. His work style and family relations could not afford any flaws. Rockey took me to see the new house he had in the southern city. It was more than twice the size of our previous residence. There was a small garden on the first floor with orange trees, cucumbers, and tomatoes. "Haley," he said, standing under the orange tree with its mottled shadow falling on his sharp features. "I'm sorry. You've suffered so much. After reading your letter to Mona, I dreamt of the landslide at Songshan. After rescuing the heavily affected areas, I began a thorough search and eventually found your body in a collapsed area." Rockey's hands trembled uncontrollably, as if recalling the heart-wrenching pain of digging with his bloodied hands in the dream. "In the dream, you saw me saving others and thought I had abandoned you." The man choked up. "I didn't know you were there or that Serena was in the disaster zone. I didn't abandon you. You were very sensitive at that time, so I kept you at home. But I didn't know someone took advantage of my absence and used Serena to provoke you. After I sent her to college, aside from living expenses and housing, I didn't care for her further. I wanted to remain silent or casually say, it doesn't matter anymore, Rockey. I've moved on, but I couldn't pull it off. I had died with the resentment of being abandoned by the person I loved during the landslide. Even in this rebirth, no matter how indifferent I acted, I couldn't deny that I had never truly smiled due to this grudge. Thank you for clearing things up, Rockey. My tormented soul finally found peace. But it's not possible anymore." Serena's side story. Before Rockey came to the southern city, Serena had sought him out. She couldn't believe her ears. "Did you really give up the transfer to the capital for Haley?" Rockey's calmness was frightening. "She is my wife. Wherever she is, that's where I go." "Rockey, don't you know how I feel about you?" Tears streamed down her face, her eyes red. "If it weren't for the family troubles years ago, Serena, I refused you when we were young. I thought I had made myself very clear. But I couldn't control myself." Serena cried inconsolably. Rockey's kindness made her believe she still had a chance after being rescued. "Rockey, you're like the sun in the sky, illuminating my life. We were meant to be together." Serena leaned in to kiss him, but Rockey stepped back. "Serena." Rockey's expression hardened. "You've always had a strong sense of pride. In front of others, I've never embarrassed you, but I've warned you privately many times. I promised your father, Uncle Serena, and Peter that I'd take good care of you. After those trials, I think you do need support or a decent foothold. But you shouldn't provoke Haley. She is my beloved." Serena fell to the ground, laughing maniacally. "Your beloved? Your beloved has left you. Even when you were dying, she didn't come to see you. Do you think you still have a future?" Rockey's departing back was her only answer. Rockey left the marital home to her. She could live there as long as she wanted. He even kept his promise to her, sending her $600 a month until her graduation. For others, this was substantial material support. For Rockey, it was just what he could offer. Rockey never changed, but Serena finally woke up to the fact that she would never get more. Later, Jorah told me that Serena, in her senior year, had become close to a foreign professor with a family while applying for an exchange program. When the professor's spouse found out, they rushed into the university classroom and beat both Serena and the professor, who was in his 50s. The professor, determined to defend his love, promptly divorced his spouse. This caused a stir at the university. Serena's reputation was tarnished. Some students were so ashamed to be in the same school as her that they strongly demanded her expulsion. Eventually, Rockey used his connections to help her resolve the issue. Later, the professor took Serena and her child abroad to complete her studies. How she fared overseas remains unknown. The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.